When recounting eerie tales this time last year, there were a few people that had some general questions and had asked for some more background. A few wanted to know what had happened since those events and how it had affected me. If you've not had a chance to see them, I will link those videos in the description below. Not every story garnered the same amount of inquiry, so I will not touch on all of them here. Going back over some of these stories from my past does put them in a better light, and the added digging has uncovered a bit more than from my first casual remembrances. So, with no more setup, here are a few more items that you may find interesting from the tales of 2020. The unsettling garden statue of the old hobo that seemed to have glowing eyes was probably the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced. Not only was it the duration and persistence, but it was that my friend saw the same thing concurrently, with little dispute between us as to what we were seeing. The eyes were so distinct and truly glowing that they could be seen out the window a few paces from the house. One test of the glow that I left out of the story, due to the time, was that at one point, having grown frustrated by the inexplicable and unsettling nature of those eyes, I resolved to act upon the statue itself. I filled up a drinking glass with some water from the sink in the kitchen, and I told my friend that I was going to splash it all over the hobo to see if the eyes changed or were even affected. I did pause as I approached the statue because even from this different approach, the eyes were glowing. I did get a little anxious and quickly splashed the head and upper torso. The eyes continued to glow, and I did take a moment to walk between the house and the windows and the statue and any light, and the eyes just had a distinct illumination of their own. I recently verified that the hobo statue is still there, and it has been there since 1972, so next year it will be there for 50 years. Well, so long as it's not moving. Finding an abandoned life-size China doll in my relative's old forest house was unexpected and unsettling, especially as it had belonged to my great-aunt, who was already in her late 80s at the time. The shock that the doll moved while my friend and I saw it on the bed is the thing that will stay with me forever. Digging into the family history, I found that the cabin, as they called it, was built in 1939. 3 generations had visited and played in the forest, swam in the small spring-fed pond, and picnicked in the small apple orchard. Even though the property was subdivided and sold off back in 1990, the structure was still in photographs up until 2018. In the last few years, I found that flood control measures had reworked the dike that formed the small pond. By 2019, the entire pond was drained and the hillside spring scraped clean of trees, and the cabin was removed with just a faint outline of the foundation left behind. It seems that I documented everything the last year it was shown in photos, and the place lasted 80 years. When I first started looking into the events surrounding the only time my mother ever mentioned something sounding supernatural, I had relied mostly on memory from what I had been told to me over time. My mother's odd feeling that she saw her future child at the top of the hill above our pasture before I was even born was the weirdest story she had ever told me. This peculiar and specific premonition was more of a story she had told me and not so much a solid recollection on her part. I would have thought she mentioned it after the fact, had it not been for the photos I had taken atop the hill, and to which I made that connection years later. I never had much more than the statements of my mom, talking about her sunbathing in the pasture, her looking up the hill into the woods and seeing someone or something at the top of the hill looking down at her. That was until I was able to go through an old collection of photos from before I was born. There was a photo of my mom pushing a lawnmower around the pasture and her sunbathing lounge chair in the background. It's not that this proved anything, except it was added evidence that all the elements of the story were in place, including the person at the top of the hill looking down at her and taking her picture.